meeting revealed. How could that happen? This is CNN Tonight. I'm Don Lemon. It turns out Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin were not done talking after their half-hour G20 meeting stretched into more than 2 hours. They had another one-on-one conversation at the end of the dinner with each other with the world leaders that night, a conversation that lasted nearly an hour. One of the White House somehow never got around mentioning until now. The only three people who know what was said: Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin, and a Russian translator. So what was it all about, and why keep it quiet? Plus, the GOP plan to repeal Obamacare down for the count, and President Trump says just let the health care of millions of Americans, health care that millions of Americans rely on, let it fail. I guess for this president, the sign on the desk should read, "The buck stops nowhere." Let's get right to CNN's chief national security correspondent, Jim Shuda, our senior political reporter, Nia Malika Henderson, also CNN political analyst Abby Phillip, White House reporter for the Washington Post. Good evening to all of you. Jim, let's start with that second meeting that we're learning about between Vladimir Putin and President Trump at the G20. What happened?
Let's be clear. At international summits, you often have pull asides, you have handshakes, you have casual conversations, in addition to formal one-on-ones. So in addition to the Putin-Trump formal one-on-one, the sit-down that we already knew about, at this dinner, you're seeing pictures of it right now, there was another conversation, previously undisclosed, as you said, between Trump and Putin. It was not 5 minutes, it was not 10 minutes, it was an hour long. And what's interesting about this is that the other people present at the G20 dinner, U.S. allies, leaders of U.S. allies in Europe, they're the ones who found it unusual, strange, at this dinner for the president to stand up, go sit down next to the Russian president and speak at that length of time, unusual to them, American allies, and then not disclose it until, and this is the latest in a series of meetings between people in Trump world and Russians, not disclose it until challenged by members of the media and others. And only today did they confirm this meeting took place.
To talk about it, and usually for things like that, there is a record of it. And the reason that the White House, there's no American record of it, but the White House's explanation is that the translator with the president, the only one, only spoke Japanese. So there was one who was with Vladimir Putin who spoke Russian, so that's why there was just a Russian translator. Yeah, but there's no American record of this now.
Can I borrow your translator? I mean, listen, there's a reason why you have others present in principals meetings like this, so that you, as a government, have your own independent record, notes of this. You might do this in a business. You certainly do this in the U.S. government. You will often have note takers who are career diplomats, or at least translators. So here you have a conversation that we, as the American people, have no record of what was said in that conversation, other than what the president will reveal if he reveals anything about it. And to this point, the White House has not revealed any details about it. At the same time, Russia, in addition to Putin's account, has their own translator to give a record of it, which can be used to their advantage if they want to. They could release details, or they can color the conversation, or they can release a false account of the conversation to Russia's advantage.
Abby, here's what the president tweeted about that tonight. He said, "Fake news story of secret dinner with Putin is sick. All G20 leaders and spouses were invited by the Chancellor of Germany. Press knew." So the dinner isn't in question. The questions are, they're over this conversation with Putin. Why didn't we hear about this second conversation between President Trump and Putin sooner?
That's right. I mean, the dinner wasn't secret. I was actually traveling with the president that night, and was sitting outside of the concert hall when this meeting apparently occurred. So that's not really the issue here. The issue is that the White House didn't want to acknowledge, it seems, that the president essentially had a one-on-one with Putin, that we can't independently verify what was said or what kind of information was exchanged. The only account that we have of this meeting is what the president told his own aides. I think the other issue is that this is a president who has no other kind of diplomatic experience. He has no political experience. And by contrast, Vladimir Putin is known to be a very, very skilled interlocutor in a moment like this. In meetings like this, he knows exactly how to represent his views to his best advantage. And the president, frankly, just doesn't have as much experience with that. So I think people are looking at this meeting and saying it was putting the United States at quite a disadvantage, and that even if the president president had wanted to have an exchange with Putin. An hour-long exchange suggests a much more in-depth conversation and the kind of thing that you wouldn't want to do without your Secretary of State, a translator, at least some other U.S. officials in the room to protect you, frankly.
Yeah. And he said, you know, if I had said any more, I mean, I think it was that we could have gotten into a fist fight or something like that. I asked him, did you meddle in our election? Did you meddle in our election? But never did the president talk about this particular exchange that they had. And I have to ask you, just when we thought there couldn't be any more questions, we learned about this. Does the White House really have any credibility when they say that this was a brief chat because it was a 1-hour off-the-books meeting?
You know, the short answer is no, they don't. I mean, this White House has a credibility problem more broadly. The president often saying things that just don't have any bearing in reality. And then when it comes to Russia, Jim Sciutto talked about previously undisclosed meetings. And yet again, here's another previously undisclosed meetings. And we've just seen that, of course, with Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner having to update his security clearance forms on a number of occasions to add meetings that he's had. We've had a sort of misdirection in terms of these meetings actually happen, and then the substance of these meetings, changing stories from this White House about what was actually said, particularly in the Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, Paul Manafort meeting, sort of rolling disclosures about how many people were in there. So that's why I think you hear now Republicans saying, is this a White House that at some point will really practice what the Wall Street Journal called radical transparency when it comes to Russia particularly, and put everything out there. I mean, the president there is saying, oh, this is a fake news story, and there are other leaders that were there, but really it's Americans, right, who need to know what the president is doing and what the substance of these conversations are, because that's what he's doing. He's representing Americans. So it's one thing for other leaders to be there, but what about representation to Americans who voted for this president and who this president leads and represents in those meetings?
And what America's about, and that's transparency. If we want to know what happened in other countries or what their leaders did, we would ask their translators, right? But we don't have one to ask for America. I want to ask you about this Donald Trump Jr. meeting in June with the Russian lawyer. Apparently the identity of the 8th person now has been
That's right. The previously undisclosed meeting, this one between the president's son. Now we know who the 8th person in the room is, in addition to the lawyer. This is Ike Kavaladze. He was a vice president at the Agalarov's real estate firm, Agalarov's. This is a Russian oligarch. His son as well was present at this meeting, a friend of Donald Trump Jr.'s. He studied at the Moscow Academy of Finance. He's a U.S. citizen who speaks fluent Russian, but keep in mind, he was tied to a previous money laundering probe. This, of course, very much at the center of this investigation. Where does the money lead you, in effect? So we now know the 8th person in the room. And when you look at the group of people in that room, this was not an insignificant meeting. You have the president's son, you have the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, you have the president's campaign manager at the time, Paul Manafort, later fired. You have Tom Goldston, who we've seen had a previous relationship with the president. You have a Russian lawyer, well known in Washington circles for lobbying for changes to U.S. sanctions. Another Russian businessman, well known in Washington circles for lobbying to change U.S. sanctions. And now this 8th person, a vice president at the Agalarov's firms, as well as a translator. These, from both sides, were significant players.
So remember the exclusive video we had of 2013, right? CNN, that exclusive video. Well, now that 8th person is there too. That's unbelievable. What's happening here?
That's right. And listen, you can see him there circled.
This is Las Vegas, by the way.
This is something that CNN gained access to just a week ago. What this speaks to is Donald Trump's prior relationship with the Agalovs. That's Emin Agalarov there to the left of that circle. And now we have Ike Kavaladze present as well. Listen, Donald Trump is an international businessman. He's met a lot of people in his time. But again, this particular video here, followed by another clip from the same time when they had dinner together with the Agalarovs and others, it shows that these people did not come out of the woodwork, as it were. There were previous interactions. The significance of those interactions, we don't know the extent of it. But Donald Trump Jr.'s characterization of this meeting as people we didn't really know came to us with something we didn't really know about. That has fallen, successively, including by an email he himself revealed, which described the intent of that meeting, which was to provide damaging information on Hillary Clinton, sourced to the Russian government.
Is this really happening?
Listen, it is.
And I mean, I just have to be sitting here listening and watching the video and saying, "Oh, I don't really know this family. I've never really hung out with them. We didn't know the people. I never met with anyone." And then everything comes out to the contrary, and then they deny it. Is this? I mean, come on.
You have a pattern of lack of transparency, right? Now, listen. That could go nowhere. We could learn that there was no significance to this, but the fact is that there is to the meetings themselves. But there is a pattern of hiding meetings and interactions. And let's be frank, the one we learned about today cannot be described as an insignificant meeting. It is the leaders of Russia and the U.S. who met privately for an hour.
Here's the difference. When you say what I said, that it's shady, and it is shady, that you're drawing a conclusion about collusion or something, that's not it. It's just that their excuses are shady. They're not being transparent with the American people and the people who are asking questions. It's shady to say, I don't know someone, I've never met them, and then there's video of you talking to them, or you see pictures of you in meetings with them. It's just...
Well, listen, forget what we think. Listen to what Republican lawmakers are saying. Wall Street Journal editorial page. It is many others who are raising these same questions here, and those are reasonable questions.
Yeah. Nia, let's talk about health care now. The president blaming everyone but himself in this latest health care failure. Here's the president today.
Let Obamacare fail. It'll be a lot easier. And I think we're probably in that position where we'll just let Obamacare fail. We're not going to own it. I'm not going to own it. I can tell you the Republicans are not going to own it.
So Nia, he is saying let Obamacare fail, but now we're learning the president invited all the GOP senators to the White House tomorrow. What's going on?
Yeah, we'll see if that meeting is more, sort of kumbaya symbolism with the Republicans, four of who at least defected in terms of the Senate bill, that first version, and then the repeal notion as well.
Is this an attempt to stop marginalizing them, maybe, and to try to at least say some nice things about them and to butter them up?
Possibly. I mean, I think it's probably going to be hard for this president to get much done in terms of substance in a meeting with 50 other people. I mean, this is the kind of work that he should have done months ago in terms of reaching out to some of these senators, people like Lisa Murkowski, people like Susan Collins, people like Dean Heller, people who had real issues with the direction of health care that was coming out of Senate leadership. So, I think this might be more symbolism than substance, but I do think the symbolism also important for Republicans who are very much battered and bruised after this setback with health care. Of course, there are also things that are probably will develop on the health care front. I don't think this is the end of it as much as the president is talking about letting it just fail. I think a lot of Republicans are troubled by some of his language there, and it was language. He has said this before. If you remember, after the House bill failed, he also said, oh, just let it collapse, and then the Democrats will come running, and then he changed his tune. So I imagine this talking point, which I think is cynical and certainly insensitive, because he's essentially saying let millions of people lose health insurance. You imagine that talking point might not stick around, and we'll see what comes out of this meeting tomorrow.
But remember also, Abby, the three female senators, Lisa Murkowski, Shelley Moore, Capito, and Capito is how she pronounces it, and Susan Collins, they weren't included in the original part of this, in the workings of this.
Right. I mean, there are, to Nia's point, there are a lot of senators who have real issues with this bill. It is not just an issue of optics. It is because they don't think that the bill actually will help their constituents. And those senators have been, in a lot of ways, fairly marginalized in the process of crafting the actual language. Now, I think tomorrow's meeting at the White House is probably what you would expect from a president. He's going to rally them, convey how important this issue is to them. But deep down inside, when you talk to people on the Hill, one of the bigger issues here is that the president is not in a position to mediate some of these disputes because he doesn't understand what's in the bill. He doesn't have a deep, nitty-gritty understanding of the policy behind health care. And that is one of the underlying problems here. It is very difficult for him to twist arms with senators who are steeped in the details, who want to know how this is going to affect their constituents. And until that problem is resolved, until someone can really resolve the actual policy disputes, I think this effort is going to continue to be at a standstill.
Shouldn't those senators have known when he said, oh, it's going to be a day one, it's going to be easy, we're going to repeal and replace, shouldn't they have said, okay, this is a warning sign that maybe he doesn't understand exactly how this process works, because now they're living it?
Yeah, I mean, I think many of them realized how hard it was going to be. I mean, some of this is a problem with the Republican Party right now, that they can't agree on health care. It's a long-standing issue. Former House Speaker John Boehner tried to warn us a couple of months ago when he said, it's just not going to happen. We've never been able to agree on what health care should look like in this country. So it's not entirely the president's fault, but the naivete has not worn off in terms of whether or not this is going to be easy.
Here's the thing where you say that, because this is because, you know, there's a tweet for everything, and they're coming back to Biden. This is 2013. He said, leadership, whatever happens, you're responsible. If it doesn't happen, you're responsible. So, he's the leader of the Republican Party. The buck stops with him. If it didn't happen, who's responsible? Any one of you could take that. Go.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously going to blame Democrats. I don't think that's really going to work for him permanently. Yeah. I mean, it would be like Obama coming in 2009 and saying, oh, I'm just going to let the economy fail because Bush made certain mistakes on his watch. I mean, he didn't do that. He obviously did something very differently. And I think, you know, at this point, he's the president. His promise was that health care would be better in terms of the quality of it. It would be much, much cheaper, and it would be easy to do. And none of that has come to fruition so far. So I think his party is going to pay the political price with everything that goes on with health care from now on.
Who knew health care could be so hard? I got to run, I got to run, guys. Thank you all. I appreciate you coming on. When we come back, one of the Democrats the president blames for the failure of Obamacare. That senator says the president's threat to let Obamacare fail is, in his words, cynical and sinister. Cory Booker is here.